We're not just protecting and ensuring people at the point of a claim. And I think the key element is, especially from my team, from our claims, from our sales, from our underwriters, we want to walk that road with those who we provide insurance for. Not just be there in a time of crisis, where then it's about actually going, how can we prevent and support you pre-claims?
Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of our podcast in association with Markel. The podcast is called The Care Sector, Navigating the Turbulent Times, and this episode is focused with our Markel colleagues to understand more about how insurers and brokers can support care organisations more effectively. My name's Liz Jones. I'm the Policy Director at the National Care Forum. We're a membership organisation for not-for-profit providers of care and support. And we work very closely with Markel, who very kindly sponsor the Third Sector Care Awards for us, which is a fantastic annual event celebrating the great work of third sector care and support organisations. So in our first episode, we were talking with some care providers, examining the challenges before COVID, during COVID, and those that remain. And some of us are not convinced we're past the pandemic yet. And we had one of our Markel colleagues with us giving perspectives around their involvement with the care sector in terms of supporting during the whole pandemic period. So if you've not listened to that episode, do go back and have a listen. Lots of really insightful stuff and some real honesty and insights about the experience of the sector during those pretty challenging times, and some thoughts about how we might build a more sustainable, resilient sector, and how we should recognise our social care professionals in many more ways than we do, including better pay. So in this session, we've got the Markel gang. So we're really delighted to have a range of colleagues from Markel who can bring their expertise to help us understand a bit more about the insurance sector for social care, give us a little bit of insight into how the pandemic made us think more and more deeply about insurance for social care, and also to hear from Markel about how they've responded to those challenges, because they were one of the few that were actually still active during the pandemic. So it's going to be fantastic to hear from our colleagues, and they are now going to introduce themselves. So on my right, I have Suze.
Yeah, hi, thanks Liz. I'm Suze Demo, so I am Head of Strategic Partners at Markel. So that basically means I am the person that hopefully makes things very smooth from a broker point of view and sort of interfaces with the broker, escalation point if there's anything that goes wrong, and kind of link into all the various teams at Markel to make that journey as simple as possible.
Okay. So you're the person who's going to help us understand how providers might want to think about buying their insurance and some key questions.
Hopefully.
Excellent. Okay. And in her usual seat?
I'm Charlotte Rowe. I'm the practice manager of Markel Care Practitioners. We are Markel's internal health and social care consultancy. So we support clients in many different ways. We support our claims teams, our underwriters, and in respect to risk mitigation, liability reduction, training. If you can imagine it, my team can do it. We will support the sector in that way.
So you're the social care guru at Markel.
Close, yes.
Yeah.
Close.
Claim it.
Yes, you are.
Okay. And on my left?
I'm Gabrielle Potter. I'm a senior claims handler within the care claims team at Markel, and I purely deal with claims day in, day out within the care sector or arising from the care sector.
Okay. So you might help us pick up on some of our comments from our previous episode about claims. Brilliant. So I'm going to ask a really basic question for the uninitiated. In the insurance world, there are lots of different organisations that describe themselves as brokers or insurance providers, and there are different relationships between them. So, for example, we work very closely with Towergate as well as Markel. Can you just explain to our listeners, viewers, kind of how the insurance world works in terms of those different players?
Yeah, absolutely. So you have brokers, and I guess the broker's job is really to sort of ask the right questions, understand the risks and your business, and put them in a presentation to the insurance company. The insurance company will then read through that, assess, the risk itself, and put a value on what the premium is effectively. So you've got the broker that basically, I guess, does the sort of information gathering, marketing of it, I guess, in simple terms. And then you've got the underwriters, which is the insurance company that will take that information, put a price against it, and should there be a claim, will obviously make the payments and fulfill it, that side of things. So very simply put, that's kind of the differentiation between the two groups.
So as a broker, you will work with many different insurance companies, potentially.
Yes.
If they're interested in offering a product.
Correct.
For your customer.
Correct. So you will have a number of different relationships. You might have preferred for certain products or areas that that insurers specialise in. And yes, you would work with a number of different insurers.
So from remembering kind of pre-pandemic and then what happened during the pandemic, I think our observations, particularly at the time, the real time of crisis was during the first and second waves of COVID. And in all of our discussions with providers and with the Department of Health and Social Care, actually, there was a sense that before COVID, we collectively as a sector, including our insurance partners, hadn't really understood properly what risks we were trying to insure against in the kind of care and support world. We hadn't really faced a challenge of kind of trying to define and compartmentalise all the potential risks. And so we were looking at quite a different profile of insurance offers. Yeah. Do you think that's fair?
I think that is fair, to be fair. I think perhaps there was maybe a simplicity of the market before COVID. And I think there was a lot of people that were non-specialist care insurers, for example, that were in the market. Quite often care was hidden, what we call a commercial combined, which is kind of a general insurance in package, without potentially the covers that would need to be in place for a care organisation, like abuse cover, like medical malpractice, like breach of professional duty would be a few examples, which a specialist wording will have cover for, or should certainly have cover for. And I think there was some stat that was sort of, 2/3 of care was hidden in a sort of commercial combined product. And I think when COVID happened, I think it unlocked and people started looking into what their care business was. And I think that was part of why there was sort of a bit of an exit out of the market, and those capacity issues that were felt through that COVID period. Was people really sort of understanding what they were actually on cover for, and perhaps making a bit of a U-turn or putting a stop to that, certainly in the short term.
Okay, so providers of insurance offering products that actually were not right, really. Not deliberately offering products that were not right, but unsophisticated.
I think it was probably not understanding the market clearly. And I think, specialist insurers, and I don't want to sort of Markel, but certainly specialist insurers, the benefit of them is that they massively understand the sectors that they work in. So they understand what the exposures are. They understand, and I mean, Charlotte will talk about it, how to risk manage and support those customers through that journey and try and sort of reduce those exposures in a way. And also, I mean, Gabrielle will talk about it as well around the claims. So, from a specialist point of view, we have specialist claims handlers that completely understand the care sector, and again should be able to sort of fast track those claims, or at least help support that claims process by understanding what they're dealing with.
It's that specialist knowledge, really, I think, it's key, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay. Do you have other specialisms, or is it just
Care
just care? The breadth of care.
Well, we do, but again, we don't try and be all things to all people. I think we're very clear around keeping that sector specialism. So, our other markets would be tech, our contractors, a little bit of light construction, legal expenses, professional indemnity would be the markets that we'd operate in. But for us, care is a massive sector.
Okay, so today we're focused on social care. So before I ask Charlotte a bit more about so what do you get with the specialist provider, I think it would be really useful for us to have some kind of top tips for care providers who are looking to renew, usually, unless they're new providers, looking to renew their insurance. Because there were some things that we found during COVID, which we probably haven't thought about properly. Certainly lead-in times, but also I think the kind of, if you had to give people 3 or 5 top tips about thinking about getting their insurance sorted for the next 12 months, what would you say?
So I guess the first thing that springs to mind, and it's very easy for me to sit and state, in episode 1, we heard about funding. We heard about, the staff issues, burnt out staff post-COVID and issues around recruitment. It's very, very easy to understand why people are really trying to focus in on the here and now of operating their companies. And I guess my counter to be that would be, don't make insurance a transaction, a sort of transactional decision, because and try and shave some money off your premium perhaps by cutting back covers, by not covering the right things, because really effectively underinsurance is the same as self-insurance. And at a point where cash flows are pretty tough, that is a very, very scary place to be, not only dealing with people's livelihoods, but the lives of the people that you're actually, got your business up and running for. It's a very scary place. So I guess go in with your eyes open, get advice, and make sure that you're sort of making the right long-term decisions. I think that would be the first thing that I would kind of say. And then the leading into that is kind of making sure that you are kind of looking at the whole package. So what are you getting in terms of the wordings, in terms of what the cover is, but also in terms of the support and the management around that risk that you've got. Are you getting up-to-date advice as to what's happening with the CQC? Are you getting information around how to put safeguarding practices? Are you getting training for staff? What are the sort of added value stuff that is being delivered by your insurance company? I think you're right. It's about getting the information and starting the ball rolling earlier. So, there is a definite link between quality of presentation, so what your broker pulls together, and the quality of that information will inevitably lead to better pricing. So, the more information that we're kind of getting at that stage, hopefully, the better premium that's going to come out of it. So it really is about making sure that all of those layers are up and running and ready to go in a timely fashion and not leaving things to the last minute.
I know that if my members were sat in this room, they would say to me, go on then, Liz, ask the question about kind of why Markel, what's different? Why does that specialist knowledge, that sector expertise, why does it really matter? And what can I expect from it? What's different about Markel, and why does that specialism really benefit me?
For starters, in regards to the social care sector, we know that it's a very broad sector with very different moving parts. I think we focused on one area in episode 1, specifically around kind of older care, but it's a very wide sector. And that understanding of all the constituted parts of that sector are really important. I think it's also understanding not just when you're purchasing that insurance, but when you've got to communicate about the risks that your service specifically encounters. And that's not just an incident occurring, but the regulatory landscape. We don't just have the CQC, CIW, CIS, RQIA, HSE. There are so many different regulators. So understanding what those regulatory mechanisms and how the policy will respond to that, what your regulatory gradings actually mean. So we know that regulators, in general, care regulators grade you. So you've got your inadequate, your requires improvement, you're good, you're outstanding. Now, if you just look at that as a broad ticket of, on a rag rating almost, they may not understand that sometimes you can have a certain grading but actually be a better performer because of the information contained in that report. A specialist provider will understand the terminology. They will understand your journey to get to that. They understand that there is an action plan in place and what you have done to rectify, even if you haven't got regraded. They will understand that what comes in your part of the sector, those specific risks. In Markel terms, our underwriters are specialist underwriters within care. My team, the Markel Care Practitioners, also act to, whether it's in pre-inception, so before that policy occurs, to understand what's going on for your business and have those conversations. But also once you're insured, also to come out and say, okay, is there elements we can help you risk manage, can help you protect yourself as a provider? Not always just in claims, but in incident management, in when you have issues regarding HR, employment, legal. We have legal advices helpline, absolutely critical to our care providers. We have a specific element of that deals with care regulation. We have our Markel law team who have specific experience within regulation and within a care setting. We have our care practitioners team, my team. We have 70 practitioners who have all been on the front line across a range of sectors. So when we're coming from a specialist provision, it's not just from we understand as underwriters, but we have all those moving parts and those services to wrap around our providers in times of crisis, but also to proactively manage risk. I think we get into this responsive. We have an incident and we respond, don't we? And that's what we think of insurance as being. Something goes wrong, then the insurance kicks in. What if we can predict what's going to happen? Because we're looking, and we raised this before about lessons learned, the culture within the industry. So it's taking those lessons learned, that transparency, accountability, duty of candor, and saying, okay, we know these are our trends in incidents. Incidents don't have to go through to a claim, but you may have to deal with complaints. So we can help providers understand that. Therefore, we're not just protecting and insuring people at the point of a claim. We're actually helping you insure yourself and defend yourself as a provider. And I think that's a really essential part of what specialist insurance does. It's holistic to a provider that also is a holistic provider.
So all of that comes with the service, does it? That incident management, that advice?
Yeah. So our providers who are insured have access to consultancy through the Markel Care product. They can use that consultancy on what would benefit them. As you said, it may be a training course. It may be incident manager. It may be pre-claims mitigation. It could be, how do we overall reduce liability? We're there to kind of support that provider. And that also works in where you have longer term relationships with an insurer. And whilst, yes, where there's funding issues currently, and you may go, I want the cheapest premium, actually that long-term relationship, and many of our providers have been with us for a long period, we can give that support and we understand you. And I think the key element is, especially from my team, from our claims, from our sales, from our underwriters, we want to walk that road with those who we provide insurance for, not just be there in a time of crisis where then you're scrambling around trying to defend. It's about actually going, how can we prevent and support you pre-claims?
Thinking about the claims side of things and some of that pre-claims work, we've got a range of questions about claims. I'm going to start with the easy one.
I'll try my very best to answer them.
Well, just from our previous discussion, we had a challenge proposed to us about how insurance supports culture. But let's just think about what difference having a specialist insurer makes in terms of getting to a potential claim or pre-claim stage. What will be different for them if they've got a product from you?
I think in terms of having access to a claims team who are well versed in dealing with claims arising within the care sector, unfortunately, as a team, we do see the things that go wrong.
Yeah.
It's the nature of the job. We see situations that need to be handled very sensitively and appropriately. And we're used to having those sorts of discussions with service providers as to things that may have gone wrong. By way of an example, I had a situation whereby a provider via their broker contacted us by telephone, wanting to report something that had gone drastically wrong within their particular service. They didn't want to discuss it on the phone and they didn't want to put it in writing. So I contacted the provider myself and again tried to gauge what the situation was. They didn't want to discuss it. They wanted to speak to somebody in person. So the following day, they actually came into our offices. We had a sit down, we had a coffee, we chatted through the situation that had occurred, and we got them the appropriate help that they needed by way of solicitors, Charlotte's assistants via MCP, and PR crisis management consultants, because it was a situation that potentially could hit the press and damage that provider's reputation. I think that's where a provider who knows the sector inside out adds value, real value.
Okay. So a comprehensive response then. So one of our guests on our previous episode, Claire, was asking about how our insurance providers can support our culture.
Mm-hmm.
So a culture of openness and transparency, which leads to the right claims being settled, as opposed to potentially spurious claims. But then also how that might affect premiums. So from your point of view, how would you assure any providers listening that you want to work with them on that culture of openness and transparency and really help them to respond to genuine claims and manage claims that they feel are less genuine?
From our perspective as a claims team, we endeavour to work closely with those service providers. We wouldn't settle or look to settle a claim without the service provider being on board with that particular decision.
Okay.
So if they feel strongly about something, as in it is spurious, or they just haven't done anything wrong, we will absolutely do our best to defend that particular claim. Unfortunately, there are situations where you do have to look to settle a claim because maybe there isn't the evidence there or you don't have witnesses. And those situations are incredibly frustrating. We as an insurer don't go off on a tangent and do what we want to do. We will ensure that the provider is fully on board with any decision that's made. And I think, Charlotte, you provide such a huge amount of support in reaching those sorts of decisions too.
I think where we kind of come in is helping providers understand what defensibility looks like.
Right.
And I think it's, if something goes wrong, and absolutely as a sector, it's that duty of candour, that's accountability, the lessons learned, that ethos is an amazing ethos. How we use certain elements to defend ourselves in the event of a complaint, but also in pre-claims. So how we record an incident, how good that documentation is, what we do at that point of incident, have we done notifications, how have we investigated that, the record keeping. I have a little bit of a rule of 3 on this. It's like you need to have a policy that says what you should be doing. You need to train the people to tell them what they should be doing as a provider, but you've also got to record that. Those 3 pillars in general, if they're done to a good level, gives you a good level of defensibility. That doesn't mean that there isn't elements that could be done better, but also it's about understanding how you present that information, how we deal with complaints in that pre-claims kind of element. We work very closely with our claims team to say, okay, we are being open and honest, but actually this is how we present that. And I think that's where we offer training around liability reduction, about understanding defensibility. You can have candour, but you can also have defensive practice, and you have to have those balance between the two. And I think it's really important for providers to understand kind of where a claim is considered, where that threshold occurs, and what as a provider you can do. The more effective you make that, actually the less money and time that costs you as a provider. And we do so much work either post claims where there's been an incident where it isn't as easy to educate that provider and work with them, or when actually we take on a new provider and say, okay, we can see, because we go out as MCP, we undertake a survey with that provider and we say, okay, yes, you understand it, but we think there's a bit of a gap here. We want to, as an insurance provider, protect you more and work with you. So when you do have a claim, we're all there. It's a quicker process.
It's collaboration.
Yeah, and I was just going to sort of add to that, if we are seeing a trend in claims, that's quite often when we bring Charlotte's team in.
I was just thinking about trends in claims.
Basically that is part of, again, the value of having a specialist is we don't just sit there and tick off the claims and your premium keeps going up and up. We do try and address the issues and put experts in there to help, hopefully, turn the situation around so they don't keep on regularly happening. So I think the whole thing does kind of tie all quite nicely together.